Hey everyone, this is Derrick Broze. Welcome back for another episode of the Conscious Resistance Live. This is episode 164, and today we're focused on the power, the potential of self-governance, and looking at the situation evolving in Venezuela. First of all, just right away, I want to let you guys know that the Conscious Resistance Live is brought to you by civil.com. That's CIVL.com. We've been partnered together for the last couple months, and Civil is now bringing my podcast to you. We're also working on some new upcoming films, and they are the place where I'm hosting exclusively hosting the conclusion of the Pyramid of Power series, which will be coming in mid-November. First off, let me let you know right away which stories we're going to be covering. We're going to be talking about self-governance in Mexico, which is a really interesting story, actually relates to where I live here in Mexico. We're going to be talking about this potential for an incoming attack on Venezuela and why that is not a good thing. We're going to be updating you guys on the latest on the domestic terror front, which I've been covering for the last couple weeks, and something else that I think we need to look at. And then our final story will just be an update that I haven't seen really shared too many places that deals with corruption in the Trump administration. I know, big surprise, corruption in the Trump administration. But this is something I haven't seen too many other people focus on or cover at the moment. So we're going to get into that. That'll be our final story. And then, of course, we will go ahead and end everything with a music video where we always feature a conscious musician every single show. So that's what's in store tonight on the Conscious Resistance Live. All right, so as we get into it, let me go ahead and, of course, remind you guys my website, theconsciousresistance.com, theconsciousresistance.com. Guys, I know I say this every week, but please bookmark the website. Stop depending on social media. I am on social media. Occasionally, you'll hear me say, follow me on social media, but the best place for my content is always going to be theconsciousresistance.com. Not only mine, but articles from our team. We got a new article this week, actually two of them. One is called ICE, the Rogue Agency Terrorizing America's Streets by Don Villa Jr. Then Flock Safety Expands Audio Surveillance, Deepening Its Network of Unlawful Data Collection by Neil Rademacher. Those are two new articles written recently. We also had one a couple weeks back, Religious Liberty is Under Threat in the Land of Free, that I think you will find interesting. I've posted a recent talk of mine, Why We Need a Holistic Liberation Movement. I'm going to be posting a new talk later this week. And then, of course, clips from my show. We do this show every Monday, and then throughout the week, I release clips. So if you see the shorter videos, those are clips from the main show. If you ever want to go back and watch the main show, theconsciousresistance.com is the best place to do so. And as I mentioned, I am partnering with Civil, this podcasting network and streaming platform. I'm honestly really, really excited to be partnered with them because it feels good to work with people who understand my value and understand my work and who want to help me boost what I'm doing. So we are not only working on this podcast, but the big thing I want you guys to know about this week is this Wednesday, we are launching this 10-week opt-out challenge. It's going to start Wednesday, October 15th. It's going to be me and John Bush. I go this Wednesday, then John will be the following Wednesday, and then I'll be back on the following Wednesday. And we're going to do that all the way to the end of the year. And it's going to be 5 lectures, courses from me. This is actually going to be the deepest dive I've done on the opting out, exit, and build philosophy. And in fact, I recorded a short video about this. So instead of just re-explaining it, why don't I show you guys that video right quick? Friends, the UK has announced they're going to start requiring digital IDs for work and travel. The EU is now starting their biometric entry-exit system on October 12th. It's getting very real out there for those of us who care about liberty and privacy and are concerned about the rise of the technocratic state. That's why I'm partnering with Civil for a 10-week webinar called 10-Week Opt-Out Challenge, where we're going to break down my exit and build strategy over 5 weeks, myself as well as John Bush. We're going to go through exit and build. We're going to go through the importance of thinking ahead, planning ahead when it comes to your money, when it comes to your food, when it comes to things like land, getting off big tech, and so many other topics. And I'm specifically going to address those of you out there who I've heard say, Derrick, I'm an older person. I'm dependent on Social Security. I'm dependent on my pension. I don't know what to do. I see the problems, but I don't know what the solutions are. Over 10 weeks, myself and John Bush are going to focus on so many of these different elements. I'm going to start on October 15th, that's next week, with a 101, what is exit and build, and most importantly, I think, mindset. Because if we don't rethink and rebuild our mindset and get past our negative thoughts and assumptions and limiting beliefs, then there's no way we're going to thrive in the face of this technocracy. But if you want to learn more and you want to learn how to get out of the banking system, unbank yourself, how to get more connected to your local food supply, how to get off the big tech surveillance system, start talking about land and travel restrictions and thinking about your mindset, then you're going to want to sign up for this 10-week opt-out webinar exclusively on the Civil platform. Check the link below or in my bio, depending on where you're watching. Okay, so there it is. There's a little explanation. As I said, I talked about that already. 10-week opt-out challenge. I'll just reiterate a little bit. It's me and John Bush. For those who are watching on screen right now, the QR code that's up in the corner, scan that and it'll take you directly to this landing page. If you're not watching live or if you're listening instead of watching, go to civil.com, civl.com/TCR, and that'll take you to the same place. Now, again, this is on the Civil platform, which is a paid platform. You can watch Civil through Roku, Fire, Apple TV, Android, iPhone, all that sort of mainstream stuff, which is a really good option for people to get access to my work that maybe normally wouldn't come across it. It costs $50 a year if you want to do an annual subscription, or just $5 a month. If you do decide to do the annual subscription, you can use the code TCR20 and get 20% off of that and get access to not only this 10-week challenge, but the Pyramid of Power conclusion before everybody else, my new upcoming documentary called Liberation 2030, and other exclusive content that I'm going to be doing for Civil. And the full schedule is listed on this link, or you can go even deeper. Like I said, I'm talking about what is exit and build. I'm talking about unbanking, talking about food, talking about getting land and travel. And we're going to be covering a whole lot in this. So I encourage you guys to check that out. It starts this Wednesday evening, October 15th. Check it out at the link there. And yeah, let's go ahead and move forward. All right. The first story, as I mentioned, we are going to talk about a situation that is actually evolving here where I live in Mexico. You know, I know that for some of you, this might not be relevant. You're like, Derrick, I don't care about Mexico news, but maybe you will once you understand what this story is about. So first off, let me say this. In Mexico, in the Constitution, there is a clause that says for indigenous communities, or original communities, as they call them, the communities that are still indigenous, because despite conquering from the Spanish and wars, civil wars, revolutions, etc., there still are lots of indigenous people in Mexico, and most of it is concentrated in the state of Chiapas, and as well as the state I'm in Michoacan, which is central Mexico. I live in the outskirts of the city of Morelia, and that is the capital of Michoacan. And Michoacan has a number of indigenous communities, including the Purépecha, which are really close by where I'm at. But the most local indigenous group that lives here in Morelia, and specifically in Michoacan, where I'm at, they are called, I want to make sure I don't misstate this real quick. So let me just, I think it's the Pirinda people, and they are, it's them as well as another name. There's two names for them. They've been here for thousands of years, generations, and they actually never submitted to the Aztec. They did apparently form an alliance with the Purépecha people here. And so a lot of the people living where I live like literally on the outskirts of town, headed towards my land, are still Pirinda people, and or at least they're mixed of indigenous people and of Spanish or Mexican locals. So in the Mexican Constitution, it says that indigenous communities can vote if they choose to become recognized as autonomous regions. This means that they would not be under the state government or the federal government or even the local government. They would be able to form their own government or their own governance models, whatever they choose. And that means they could decide, and they would have to just, take care of their roads, any sort of infrastructure they have. It's true freedom in the sense of, hey, the government's going to leave you alone. We're not going to bother you, but you got to police yourselves. You got to take care of yourselves. And that comes with a lot of responsibility. This is one thing I don't think so many people in the US and elsewhere, libertarian anarchists, really contemplate or think about. Something I've given a lot of thought to, that true freedom and true liberation, it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of work and time and energy. It's not just, okay, I'm free. Well, then now how do you protect yourself? How do you defend yourself? If you're not going to rely on or depend on the government or the cops, which many of us don't do that even as things are. And even here where I'm at locally, a lot of these people, they know that the government's not going to take care of them, whether that means give them resources, provide for them, defend them against the cartels or other criminals. That is another complicated issue here in Mexico, is that when you say you want to be autonomous, well, that means you have to be willing to defend and police your community, whether that means against violent thugs from the government or violent thugs in the form of cartel. And of course, cartel and government are so interlocked that sometimes it's hard to tell the difference, right? But that's a reality that a lot of indigenous communities have faced. And so the Perinda people over here in a town called San Miguel del Monte, they have decided that they wanted to vote on whether or not to become autonomous, become self-governing. And literally I could walk out my house right now and go on a bike ride and I'd be in San Miguel del Monte. So this is literally right here in my neighborhood. They've actually voted yesterday, Sunday, as I'm recording this. Let me go ahead and hit translate real quick so you guys can see this. It says, disinformation campaign denounced in San Miguel del Monte, 3 days of consultation by self-government. Translation is not perfect, obviously, but I'm going to show you a couple others. San Miguel del Monte, denuncio campaña de desinformación. This is all about disinformation. Apparently, the locals are saying that the government, the municipality of Morelia, so the big city in the state, have been spreading disinformation in the lead up to this vote, which, as I said, just took place yesterday, October 12th, telling people that if they vote yes to become self-governing, to shake off the shackles of the state and local and federal government and to take care of themselves, that there would be all kinds of chaos would take place. Like, in fact, we talked to some locals, some friends, and they said, well, they told us we won't be getting any government help or any resources. And this means even like paving the roads, because it's quite rural over here, like out on the mountain. And so there's dirt roads, but the government occasionally will come in and fix those roads or repair them. So people were being told, if you vote yes on this, you're going to be completely taking care of yourselves, which is true. And you're going to have to, you're going to have to figure everything out. We're not going to be here. And there was also, of course, some disinformation, as some people are saying, that there would be roadblocks. The roads would get shut down if they vote yes, that, the cartel might attack them as soon as they say yes, just all kinds of stuff. And who knows the truth, right? Because at the end of the day, as I'm going to share in a moment, I have been to one of the communities, Cheran, which is infamously declared autonomous back in 2011, so almost 15 years ago, and they've been defending and protecting their community. And so they have their own, you could call it police, but it's a volunteer defense force that everybody in the community kind of rotates and participates in. And they have, their own sort of neighborhood councils that come together. I think this is as close to a true democracy, like grassroots people's democracy, as possible, where the neighborhoods, you're involved on the neighborhood level. And in that case, since they know the feds and the state aren't in charge of them, they do set up roadblocks. They at least have filters, you could say, where they check people coming into the community just to see who they are, make sure they're not causing trouble or bringing in drugs or guns and things like that. And so maybe that would be the case, that if the communities decided, and this was 4 different areas that were voting to become self-governing, if they did decide they wanted to be self-governing, maybe they could decide they want to shut the roads down occasionally, or they want to put a filter up to protect themselves and make sure they know who's coming in and out and things like that. That is completely possible. That is something that could happen. So we only learned about this a couple days ago. I was posting about it this weekend on social media, and I didn't get to go in person to go kind of check out the vote. But the vote did take place. And unfortunately, with only 67 votes of difference, 379 people voted yes in favor of becoming, autonomous. The other 446 voted no. So the no's won, and San Miguel del Monte and some of these other areas are unfortunately not going to be self-governing. And you can see some pictures here. There's pictures of the people had a lot of questions because, like I said, there was all kinds of disinformation going around. There was people making claims that I don't know are necessarily true. And so the locals were quite confused. They were kind of worried about what the truth of the matter was, let's say. And in the end, they are not going to be becoming self-governing, unfortunately. As you see, the title says, this afternoon, the inhabitants who make up the tenure, which is the colonia of San Miguel del Monte, determined by the majority of votes, 446 against 379, not to be a self-government. And this is another article about whether or not self-governance can be the salvation or the punishment for the local communities. And I just want to show you, look, this is a little sign. It says, Bienvenidos San Miguel del Monte. This is literally like a 7-minute bike ride from where I live right now, 6 or 7-minute bike ride. So this is something happening in my neighborhood, which is kind of, on one hand, it's cool to see that this self-governance thing was even on the table, because I mean, imagine that wherever you live in the United States, Canada, Western Europe, Australia, anywhere else you might be listening to, imagine the government giving you an opportunity to vote to become independent from them. That's not really a normal thing in most places, but it is in the Mexican Constitution, and it is quite common in the state of Michoacan. There have been a number of communities who have voted to do this. Now, if San Miguel del Monte and these other areas would have said yes, they would have been the first Perinda communities to vote in favor of self-governance, and it would have been a big thing. Unfortunately, it didn't pass. We'll see where things go from here. But if you're interested in these ideas, I have a documentary called Ni un Paso Atrás, The Story of Cheran, Mexico, which I produced in 2021 after visiting the area right around their 10-year anniversary. Again, April 15, 2011 is when the residents of Cheran organized an armed resistance to fight off illegal logging and kidnapping in their community. And they kicked out politicians, police, and loggers accused of cartel ties. And they eventually organized, and they were given the ability to become self-governing. Now, that's not without its challenges, of course, but that was 15 years ago. And here's the people of Cheran, you can see. And this is in our documentaries tab. In case you're ever curious, you go to theconsciousresistance.com, check out documentaries. All of my documentary work, short films, long films, full length, are available there. And I encourage you to check that out. The Story of Cheran will be in the show notes. If you want to learn more about how these kind of things operate in Mexico, I went there in person, met some of the people, talked to them, got to learn their stories, and share that. And I think that, to me, the lesson that the reason I'm bothering sharing this with you, not only because this is where I live and I think it's important, it's something that's interesting to me, is because self-governance is the answer. And I wish that I had been more knowledgeable, more aware of this ahead of time. Not only that, I'm born in Texas. My family's from Mexico 4 generations back, but I'm not exactly the person to just walk into a community and say, hey guys, I'm an anarchist. Let me tell you why this self-governance thing is good. They had their own reasons for believing in it. And obviously some people were convinced that it wasn't a good idea. I wish it had gone the other way, because it would be another beautiful experiment in self-governance. And I mean, realistically, it could have affected the land that we own. It could have affected my neighborhood that I live in positive or negative ways. I really don't know. But that's what I want to reemphasize again, is that true liberty, true freedom, it is something that takes personal responsibility. I think a lot of people out there think they want to be free, but they don't really understand what that even means in the first place. What does that mean to be a free person of mind, body, and spirit, right? That involves a lot of personal responsibility, taking responsibility for your actions, for your choices, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that is something I think is scary for a lot of people. They would rather not be in charge of their own decisions. So even if the government's corrupt, even if politicians lie and cheat and steal, it's okay. I'd rather kind of deal with that than have to be in charge of my own life. I unfortunately think a lot of people really do truly feel that way. But the communities of Mexico that have voted to become self-governing, and like I said, there's quite a few of them, not only Cheran, but others in Michoacan, as well as things in Chiapas and elsewhere. And I'm not saying I endorse all these people's politics or anything like that. But what I love about the story of Cheran is that they banned political parties. They banned the state police from coming in there. You know, they really saw that the political parties started turning neighbor against neighbor, and that ultimately they needed to come together and take care of their own community. Now, again, this is not an option in the United States or Western Europe or most places in our modern world, but it is something that is possible out here in Mexico, and it's possible for the indigenous communities, and we can learn so much from them. So I hope you guys will look more into the story in the show links and check out the documentary on Cheran, because my hope is that eventually where we live in our land, that our community, not only will we be governing ourselves, but eventually we do get to a point where we're not paying taxes to the government or anything of that sort, because we have declared ourselves autonomous and independent, and we have the ability to defend it. Because once you want to be free, you also got to be free to defend yourself against incoming threats. And I think it's a whole other conversation for another day, but I think that's an important story, and I hope you guys will check it out. Well, Donald Trump and his peacemakers, who are out there right now bragging about the Israeli deal and all the wonderful things they're doing over there, which, as I talked about last week, is a technocratic so-called peace plan. It's not going to be the Palestinians, involved in manifesting their own destiny and governing themselves, like what I was just talking about in Mexico. It's going to be organized by a technocratic peace committee with this Orwellian speak. And so while Trump's doing that and demanding to be given a Nobel Peace Prize for all these countries and wars he claims he's ended, which is not true, he's ramping up to start another war in Venezuela. Now, you probably have seen this, guys, because for one, there's been the boats that have, there's I think 4 of them, maybe 5 at this point, boats that have been drone bombed from the sky by the U.S. government, U.S. military, not in U.S. waters, but in international waters off the coast of the Caribbean. And this to me is just, it's insane. It's insane, but it's not surprising because this is just a remix, a bringing back of everything we saw post 9/11, where Obama, under he was the drone king. I call Trump the drone emperor because he dropped more drone bombs than Obama did in 1 year of his first term, and continues to do so. He also got rid of the requirement that says that the government has to report how many drones bombs they drop. So we really don't know anymore at this point how many Trump has dropped, how much Biden dropped, and we won't know about how many any future president drops because of Trump's actions. Nevertheless, they are violating the Constitution, violating international law, and violating all morals and decency. Of course, the way they're doing this, the way they're getting the American people, particularly MAGA, to support this is by scaring them and saying, those guys on that little dinghy boat were bringing in fentanyl, and it was enough fentanyl to kill the entire population. If you want to protect your kids and your family, well, then you better let us bomb whoever we want anywhere in the world. Where have I heard this before? We were told, if you want to be safe from terrorists, Al-Qaeda, even people who had nothing to do with 9/11, we need to be free to drone bomb them and kill them in any country in the world. And just think about the hubris and the just insanity of that the U.S. officials believe they own the world. They feel so confident. And I guess it's because we got weapons of mass destruction and, we can bully everybody around. And of course, the dollar is based around, the global economy is based around the dollar. So the United States has a lot of leverage to bully other countries, and most of them comply. And so the U.S. says, we can chase terrorists anywhere in the world. We don't care about if we have to violate your sovereignty, your so-called borders. If we see a terrorist, or now a drug dealer, a cartel member, a gang member, we're going to come get them in your country. Constitution be damned, law be damned, international law be damned, because we get to do whatever the hell we want. And that's just the same continuation of these policies. So the Trump administration has been ramping up this propaganda, telling people the Venezuelan government, particularly President Maduro over there, is involved in the cartels. And they have these claims about this cartel, the son, I can't remember the full name, we'll pull it up in a moment, claiming that the cartel has ties to the president of Venezuela and that he is actively funding drug cartels and drugs being brought into the United States as a way to destabilize the country. The Trump administration has supplied no evidence of this, literally zero evidence to back up their claim, as well as, by the way, zero evidence for any of these boat bombings. They haven't provided anybody like any evidence. Oh, this is who was on the boat. We have them. They're linked to this cartel. They're linked to these drug crimes. It's just, trust me, bro. Trust me, bro. I promise you, there was cartel members and gang members and killers on those boats. Who cares about the Constitution? Just let us bomb whoever we want. So the propaganda has been ramping up where they're saying Maduro is directly sending these boats to the United States. He's trying to infect the youth with fentanyl. And this is, the war drums are starting to beat now. So I want to go over a couple of articles here and we're going to dive into this. Again, you're watching the Conscious Resistance Live. My name is Derrick Broze. Everyone, this show is brought to you by Civil.com. From weapons of mass destruction to narco states, how the U.S. sells wars the intelligence doesn't support. This is from a few weeks back from Alan McLeod, who's a great writer and journalist over at Mint Press News. I'm not going to read you the entire thing, but as you can tell from the title, what he's talking about is how from weapons of mass destruction, you guys remember that, post 9/11, they used weapons of mass destruction. They've done everything they could, the U.S. government, the U.S. military, to lie to the people, to claim that there's a reason we need to go to war. Well, they bombed us for 9/11. Gaddafi has... he's killing people. He has his own gold currency. He doesn't have a central bank. Pay no attention to that. Saddam Hussein is the butcher of Iraq. Like we need to go after these people. Like no matter what, they're going to find a reason, some excuse to tell people, give us the authority to go over there And in fact, they just take the authority, but really they just want the American people to back down and do nothing. But the article says here, the Trump administration is once again setting its sight on Venezuela. In recent weeks, President Trump deployed additional naval, air assets to the Caribbean, including 7 warships, a submarine, and an amphibious assault ship designed for maritime invasions. A squadron of advanced F-35 fighter jets has also been relocated to Puerto Rico, bringing them within striking distance of Caracas. In total, around 4,500 personnel, including 2,500 combat-ready Marines, have been repositioned to this area. In what could be an opening salvo of a major war, the military has already begun to flex its muscles. In September, it destroyed a small Venezuelan vessels. We talked about this, carrying out attacks on boats. Trump celebrated his action in a post on Truth Social, claiming that the boat was carrying illicit drugs to the United States. And again, as I said, Trump claimed that the narco-terrorists were, quote, operating under the control of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, and that he is responsible for mass murder, drug trafficking, sex trafficking, acts of violence across the United States. Now, look, I'm not a defender of Nicolas Maduro, so don't take this and say like, oh, just like you're an Assad apologist, you're a Maduro apologist. No, I'm not. I don't trust any president of any government. I'm sure there's a few who have done occasionally a good thing, but for the most part, they're politicians who believe they have the authority to rule over other people's lives. Those aren't the kind of people I endorse or I support. And what I'm showing you on screen for those who are watching is one of the drone bombings. You can see this boat, boom, big explosion, whole thing's on fire. If anybody survived the initial hit, they surely burned up in the fire. And so Trump is doing this, and Alan McLeod in this article is just talking about how it's been building up, it's been ramping up. Now we get to this section, claims versus evidence. The Trump administration's extraordinary claims about Maduro and Venezuela have convinced few experts. Professor Julia Buxton of Liverpool John Moores University, a specialist in both global drug policy and Venezuelan politics, told Mint Press News, quote, the claim that Venezuela is a major drugs producer has been an ongoing theme of the U.S. campaign against Venezuela dating back to the early 2000s. This kind of anti-drug messaging is really common in U.S. foreign policy and strategy for at least 100 years. What we have got here is essentially just recycled Ronald Reagan talking points. It is unsubstantiated and absurd, and it is really not backed by any official data. The data does indeed jar widely with the Trump administration's accusations. The UN Office on Drugs, Crimes, and World Drug Report in 2025 says that cocaine is primarily produced in Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia, and transported via ports in Ecuador to the United States. Venezuela is not mentioned at all in this UN 2025 report, which catalogs producers, consumers, suppliers, and supply lines of drugs. Now, look, I'm not trying to say the UN is the ultimate source. I know he uses it here. It's one source. And I'm also not trying to say that no drugs have ever left Venezuela for the United States. I'm sure some have. But is it this mass producer of drugs that the United States is being told? Not by any means, guys. Not by any stretch of the imagination. The USDA's own 2025 National Drug Threat Assessment essentially agrees with the UN. This 90-page document only mentions Venezuela in 2 paragraphs on a single page. It says the section on Tren de Aragua, which is allegedly the gang that is infiltrating the United States via Venezuela. It doesn't attempt to link them to the Venezuelan government. In fact, a declassified U.S. National Council report from April 2025 concedes that the Maduro regime probably does not have a policy of cooperating with Tren de Aragua and is not directing TDA movement to and operations in the United States. The intelligence community bases this judgment on Venezuelan law enforcement actions, demonstrating the regime treats TDA as a threat. Because that's been the other big thing, is Trump is saying Maduro is sending in these violent criminals, Tren de Aragua, which is a real gang and is a violent, crazy gang that should be dealt with. But the evidence linking them to Maduro and the Venezuelan government is either non-existent or very, very, very controversial and not widely accepted. The report goes on to note, and again, this is the U.S. National Council report, Intelligence Council from April 2025, says that the Venezuelan intelligence, military, and police services have, quote, been engaged in armed confrontations with the gang, and that it has, quote, not observed the regime directing TDA, including to push migrants to the U.S., which probably would require extensive redacted coordination. I imagine that means coordination with the president or somebody else, who knows? FBI analysts agree with the above assessment, the document concludes. So the National Intelligence Council, an official government body, serves to deliver data gathered by intelligence services to lawmakers and the private sector. And so you've got the National Intelligence Council of the U.S., you've got the US DEA, and you've got a UN report all saying that this so-called evidence that Trump is providing is really not adding up. And then he goes further in here on the U.S. history, drug policy history, and of messing with South America. It's worth reading, guys. It goes deeper. But the point here is that Venezuela is back in the crosshairs. This is what I think we're leading towards. I'm going to show you a couple more stories here in a moment. I think this is where it's going for, is that Trump wants to get in Venezuela, and he's wanted to for a long time. The U.S.'s intentions for Venezuela appear even more dubious given its quarter-century long history of regime change attempts against the government. The election of socialist, anti-imperialist President Hugo Chavez in 1998 immediately put Venezuela on Washington's radar, and the U.S. soon began preparing a coup d'etat against him. Right-wing leaders were flown back and forth from Caracas to Washington, D.C. for meetings with top American officials. The U.S., through NED and USAID, began funding anti-Chavez forces who would spearhead an April 2002 coup. On the day of the coup, U.S. Ambassador Charles Shapiro was present at the coup headquarters, and an American warship entered Venezuelan waters. The Bush administration immediately recognized the right-wing government, only for it to fall to a counterinsurrection 2 days later. And he's also going to talk about here in a moment about Juan Guaido, which was during the first Trump administration, was the puppet leader that they tried to install in Venezuela, which didn't succeed. And, here we go. Throughout the period, the Trump administration instructed the Venezuelan opposition to boycott elections, preferring to attempt to unseat Maduro through force. In 2019, it supported a bizarre attempt by Juan Guaido, a relatively unknown leader of a smaller far-right party, to declare himself the true president of Venezuela on a technicality. Trump immediately recognized him and pressured dozens of Western countries to do the same. Member of Trump's inner team piled the pressure on Maduro. John Bolton allowed himself to be seen with a notepad reading 5,000 troops to Colombia, while Marco Rubio tweeted images of Gaddafi's corpse to Maduro, a clear threat of what they had planned for him. 3 times in the United States in 2019, U.S. officials released statements telling Venezuelans that today was the day they would win their liberty, urging them to get on the streets and instructing military officers to rebel and march on the presidential palace. However, most Venezuelans rejected this, and Juan Guaido was unable to go anywhere in the country without being yelled at and even attacked. And so they tried to basically install their puppet and say, hey, this is the new president of Venezuela. It didn't go anywhere, thankfully. So for those who don't have that historical context, that's all we're seeing. So when you're seeing this stuff about we're stopping fentanyl coming into the United States, or we're stopping gang members, what you're really witnessing is a buildup of a conflict that has been going on for decades, but particularly has been going on since at least 2019 with Donald Trump trying to install this puppet. And so let's go to this other piece here, because this is the other thing you're going to start seeing. NPR says, Venezuela's opposition leader Maria Corina Machado wins 2025 Nobel Peace Prize. Oh, wow, look. So now the person they're claiming, this is like the new Juan Guaido, who didn't succeed in 2018. Nobody really wanted him. Now they got a woman. She's seen as the opposition leader. And look, I don't know anything about her, so I'm not trying to claim she's not really an opposition leader. Like I said, I'm not apologizing for Maduro. I'm not saying this woman doesn't have any good ideas, but clearly the Western governments have a reason for propping her up. And all of a sudden she gets a Nobel Peace Prize. That's pretty convenient, the timing of it all. Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado has won this year's Nobel Peace Prize for her, quote, struggle to achieve a just and peaceful transition from dictatorship to democracy. The announcement of Machado as winner of the prestigious award came as a surprise after intense speculation that Trump could be a wild card after negotiating a Gaza ceasefire this week. But the Norwegian Nobel Committee said on Friday that her tireless work promoting the democratic rights for the Venezuelan people was, quote, one of the most extraordinary examples of civilian courage in Latin America in recent times. She's been barred from running for president. She apparently lives in hiding. And she keeps the flame of democracy burning amidst the growing darkness, even while the president's brutal authoritarian Venezuelan control continues. In the video of her receiving the news posted to the Nobel Prize website and social media, she expresses shock at winning. Let's just play a little bit of this video. It's a 4-minute video. We don't need to play the whole thing. Let's go ahead and skip through it. They're calling her. They're going to show video of her in hiding. Maybe they're just going to show audio. They don't actually show her. But she says, oh my God, I have no words. I'm just one person. I certainly do not deserve this. This is an achievement of the whole society. So she's 58 years old. She's been one of the staunchest critics of Maduro's United Socialist Party of Venezuela, which came to power in the 90s under former President Hugo Chavez. Maduro succeeded Chavez in 2013. She's an industrial engineer by profession, former legislator in the Venezuelan National Assembly. She's been shot at, targeted by federal prosecutors, and she hoped to be a candidate in presidential elections in July 2024, but she was banned from running, and instead she backed a different party. So they claim that Maduro had won a third term with 50% of the vote, but of course people are saying it's been rigged. And look, I'm not saying it's not rigged. Just I feel like I got to keep saying this because somebody's going to say, Derrick, you don't know what it's like in Venezuela. Maduro is a violent criminal. He is, and he's not a good guy, and I'm not defending him. But if you think that this woman, Maria Corina Machado, is going to do something different, even if she has the best of intentions, she's not going to get in power without some support and backing from the U.S. and Western Empire. Here she is talking to some Venezuelan soldiers. So, excuse me, she's a right-wing politician considered to be Venezuela's Iron Lady who favors privatizing the state oil company, free market policies, and supports international efforts to isolate and pressure the Venezuelan government. She has been supported by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Well, that's a great endorsement. We know that he's a puppet of Israel, and he'll do whatever he's told. Following the announcement of her win, she praised President Trump. I dedicate this prize to the suffering people of Venezuela and to President Trump for his decisive support of our cause. There you go. I mean, if that's not calling for the U.S. to come in and help out, I don't know what is. I'm sure it will get more explicit, but I'm just sharing this, guys, because you have to look at the history of the U.S. trying to intervene in Venezuela and trying to install puppets like Juan Guaido. Well, now the newest opposition leader, she just won a Nobel Prize. That's going to bring a lot of attention to her. Here she is tweeting, "The recognition of the struggle of all Venezuelans is a boost to conclude our task, to conquer freedom. We are on the threshold of victory, and today, more than ever, we count on President Trump, the people of the United States, the people of Latin America, and the democratic nations to achieve freedom and democracy. I dedicate this prize to the suffering people of Venezuela and to President Trump for his decisive support for our cause." So I wouldn't be surprised, guys. They've got, as the report from Alan McLeod was talking about, the U.S. has been putting boats and F-35 fighters nearby Venezuela, like they're preparing for something. And so while everybody's celebrating this peace plan in Gaza, Trump's got more plans for Venezuela. And I just want to show you this. This will be linked in the show notes. These are just a few of the reports I did starting back in February 2019. What you need to know about the coup in Venezuela. What you need to know about the coup in Venezuela Part 2, Part 3, and then in May 2019, what the coup in Venezuela, what you're not being told about Juan Guaido and the attempt to stage a coup out there. This is going back 6 years ago. And then here's another one, the Venezuelan coup plotters attempt to kick activists out of embassy. That's just kind of a backstory. And then even this one, this was during April 2020 in COVID as it was going on. Donald Trump uses COVID-19 panic to expand drug war and to attack Venezuela. And I encourage you to look that up because there was some bills and measures that were passed really early on during COVID, which did exactly that. And that report I have right here, it details that, how Trump was kind of already setting the stage for that. So the other thing I want to say, here's a tweet I put out yesterday. The power Trump is using to drone bomb alleged cartel members and drug dealers in international waters was first established by Republican President George W. Bush and then continued by Democratic President Barack Obama. This is one of the many ways that the parties pass the baton of tyranny back and forth. This is what I call it, the baton of tyranny. It just goes back and forth and back and forth, and it will continue to do so until the people stop believing in this false left-right paradigm, which continues to enslave us. That doesn't mean there are no differences between liberals and conservatives or even Democrats and Republicans, but at the end of the day, those corporate parties work together on war, on surveillance, on Zionism, and on so many other issues. They're not actually there for you. There might be a couple of people here speckled in there to give you hope in the system, but that system cannot save you and it will not save you. They're going to continue to play the left-right paradigm. Trump's going to advance the agenda down the field, and he's going to pass the baton back to the Democrats as they elect AOC or Gavin Newsom or somebody else. And then it'll continue and continue, and people keep bickering. But what will continue? War, violence, death, theft, over and over and over again until we realize that the two-party system is not the answer, my friends. All right, I want to give you one more reminder, guys. This Wednesday, the 15th, 10-week opt-out challenge. It begins exclusively on Civil. What's going to be cool about this is it's going to be 90 minutes. So I'm going to be doing an hour presentation for each area: exit and build 101, mindset, how to get unbanked, big tech exit plan, how to get connected to your food supply, buying land, travel restrictions. And then there will be a 30-minute Q&A exclusively with the Civil members. So I'm sorry to say this isn't going to be available on my website, YouTube, or anywhere else, but I'm also happy to say that it's going to be on the Civil platform, because they are a platform dedicated to promoting individual liberty, voluntarism, upgrading civilization with human respect, and we are completely aligned on these values. So if you sign up for Civil, either monthly or annually, you can get access to this. I encourage you to do so, guys. It can be just $5 a month. $5 a month if you want. You get access to all their documentaries, all their other content. You can watch the entire Pyramid of Power series. You can see exclusive interviews I haven't released anywhere else. You can see my upcoming new documentaries, and you get access to this full 10-week challenge by myself and John Bush. I don't know, guys. It seems like an incredible deal. You get to support them. You support me, and they will see that working with me is worth their time and their energy. And so I hope you guys will do so, and find out more about that at the link below, civil.com. Here, let me go and put it on the screen again right there for those who got the ability to scan a QR code. Go ahead and scan that QR code, and you can learn more about the 10-week challenge on the Civil platform. All right, guys, before we go on to our final two stories, I want to remind you as well that the People's Reset 2026 is coming up in just, October 13th. So you got November, December, January. It starts January 28th. You got 3.5 months, guys. Come down to Mexico. Come out here. Get out of the winter wherever you're at. Experience what it's like to be in Morelia, this beautiful, historical, cultural city. Connect with 500 other like-minded, freedom-minded people who are focused on solutions in the areas of health, permaculture, building parallel systems, homeschooling. We're going to have family and kids activities. There's going to be multiple concerts. We're going to be doing a conscious speed dating. We have people in the age ranges we get are from like babies a couple months old up to couples in their 80s and everything in between. So you got people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and so on. It is a multi-generational, completely solutions-focused event, and I'm so honored and proud to be a part of it. Check out this quick promo, and we'll be right back.
Our power is in our voice. Our power is in our thoughts. Our power is in our actions. Our power, it's already innate in who we are. We are the earth. We are the sky. We are the trees. We are our ancestors. We are the future generations. We are all that is.
All right. That is the People's Reset 2026. Find it at thepeoplesreset.org. Tickets are available right now for only $188 USD until November 1st. They go up to $222 on November 1st. So all you got to do is buy your ticket, find you a flight, connect with people on the Telegram group who are coming. If you're looking for solutions, friends, especially with everything going on, digital IDs, biometrics, which is the whole reason we're doing that 10-week challenge, then you're going to want to be at the People's Reset, guys. I promise you it will be worth your time and your energy. So the next story, we're going to pick up on our continuing look at the rise of the focus of domestic terrorism. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I showed you the executive order. Let's go ahead and pull it up. The executive order from the Trump administration about Antifa. And I talked about how the language in there should concern, well, everybody, but especially those of us who call ourselves anarchists or who have been considered anti-government extremists, that this is going to be used against you in the near future. Now that the precedent is being set by Donald Trump, designating Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization. This was issued September 22nd, 2025. So I've already covered this in a previous video. But what we're going to talk about today, so that was September 22nd. 3 days later, Trump does this presidential actions. So you have executive orders, which is one type of presidential action, and it's a way for presidents to bypass Congress and just basically say, this is a policy we want to do without going to Congress. And I've personally always thought that the executive orders are a bad move and it shouldn't be the way things get done. But unfortunately, they're normalized by both parties and most people accept them as normal. But besides executive orders, you also have what are called presidential memoranda. And these are national security presidential memorandums. These are issued by many presidents. They've been issued in the past. And again, it's just another way for presidents to sidestep going through Congress and getting things done the so-called right way, going through the systems that have been set up by the Constitution and the government to get what they want. Instead, they're just like, no, I'll just issue an executive order. No, I'll just issue a national security presidential memorandum. So Trump did this one 3 days after the executive order, countering domestic terrorism and organized political violence. Now, this isn't very long. A lot of it is political speak. Now, of course, they have a couple paragraphs talking about how domestic terrorism is on the rise. Of course, they include Charlie Kirk in there. And we all know there's so many questions about Charlie Kirk's alleged death. And I say alleged now, guys, because as days go on, I'm definitely questioning whatever the hell really took place. I'll have some more reports on that soon. So they kind of build up on that. They're saying we've got all this political violence, but it is not a series of isolated events, and it does not emerge organically. Instead, it is a culmination of sophisticated, organized campaigns of targeted intimidation, radicalization, threats, and violence designed to silence opposing speech, limit political activity, change or direct policy outcomes, and prevent the functioning of a democratic society. A new law enforcement strategy that investigates all participants in these criminal and terroristic conspiracies, including the organized structures, networks, entities, organizations, funding sources, and predicate actions behind them is required. So that's the one thing, is Trump is calling for a new law enforcement strategy to investigate anybody and everybody who may be involved in these so-called criminal and terroristic conspiracies in some way or another. Now, I just want to say on that, look, are there organizations like NGOs that are funding different groups to get a message across? Of course. George Soros is one of them. A lot of you are hyper-focused on him, but he's not the only one. And the right wing does it too. It's not just the left-wingers like George Soros or Bill Gates. There are right-wing groups like Council for National Policy, which largely escape most of the so-called independent media's view because they're so focused on the left right now, particularly. But that is true, that there are networks of people who fund groups, and that can be just, we're going to throw $1 million to an activist group and hope that they hold the signs that we want and spread the messages we want. But what they're claiming is that there is a organized network of people who are funding the riots and funding the assassination attempts and stuff like that. None of that has been put forth. You guys might remember that after Trump's alleged assassination attempt in Butler, PA, which I don't believe was real, there started to float this idea that Iran was involved in some way. And now I've even seen people saying that China may have involved in Charlie Kirk's shooting. They're clearly trying to foment this sort of fear and panic in the American mind so that we allow them, once again, to go to war with somebody else. Probably, I wouldn't be surprised if very soon, tying into our last story, they claim that the president of Venezuela, that he's involved in sending in, terrorist groups, or he's funding Antifa, or he's trying to kill Trump. So they go on here, though. Let's continue on. It says there are common recurrent motivations uniting this pattern of violent and terroristic activities under the umbrella of self-described anti-fascism. Again, think about this. Anti-fascist is being, kind of labeled a bad thing, to be against fascism. These movements portray the foundational American principles as support for law enforcement and border control as fascist to justify and encourage acts of violent revolution. I don't agree with that. I don't think we should be having a violent revolution. I don't think insurrection is going to get us where we think we might want to go. But I definitely don't support, the cops' actions all the time. And I definitely don't support the way that they're handling the border. Does that make me a terrorist? This anti-fascist lie has become the organizing rallying cry used by domestic terrorists to wage a violent assault against democratic institutions, constitutional rights, and fundamental American liberties. Common threats animating this violent conduct include anti-Americanism, anti-capitalism, and anti-Christianity. So think about that. Does that mean anybody who is so-called anti-Christian or anti-capitalist or anti-American, which, by the way, includes a lot of people who live in the United States, does that mean you're a domestic terrorist? It also includes support for the overthrow of the U.S. government. Again, how many of you radical conspiracy nuts out there have talked about overthrowing the U.S. government on the internet? Well, you might be a domestic terrorist. They say extremism on migration, race, and gender. Obviously, they're talking about transgender stuff. They're talking about like people who maybe are anti-white, open border people, but still all of that fits under freedom of speech and a hostility towards those who hold traditional American values on family, religion, and morality. Again, that's all protected by free speech. Well, it says again, here's the step they want to take. Requires a national strategy to investigate and disrupt networks, entities, and organizations that foment political violence, so that law enforcement can intervene in criminal conspiracies, and check this word out, before they result in violent political acts. Does that sound like pre-crime to anybody? Let's read that one again. The U.S. requires a national strategy to investigate and disrupt networks, entities, and organizations that foment political violence, so that law enforcement can intervene in a criminal conspiracy before they result in violent political acts. Now, to some of you might hear that and say, Derrick, they're just talking about stopping crime before it happens. Yeah, that's called pre-crime. How does the government do that? Well, they got to survey us more. They got to spy on your communications more. And then, how long is it going to take before they do what they've been doing for decades after 9/11 and go find some half-wit, handicapped, mentally not all there, Antifa radical on the internet, and then they're going to secretly meet with him and say, hey, we can help you blow up the White House or something. The same way they've done with all the so-called Muslim terrorists over the last couple of decades. They find somebody who's not really well put together, maybe not mentally all there, and they essentially entrap them. I've been writing articles about this since like 2013, 2014, telling people about this. Even the mainstream has acknowledged this, that the FBI had crossed the line between finding terrorists and entrapping people. You better believe there's going to be some Antifa terrorist caught in the coming months. I'm calling it now. Sometime this year or early next year, they're going to claim they caught some Antifa terrorists, even with the Charlie Kirk thing. Most people don't believe that Tyler Robinson shot Charlie Kirk, but it's easy for them to pin it on him and say, see, he was radicalized through transgender this and through Antifa this. Clearly, we have a problem here. So now we got to declare Antifa a terrorist organization. Now we got to start focusing on domestic terrorism. It's so obvious what's happening here. And I hope you guys can see it, and I hope you will spread the word. It continues. Through this comprehensive strategy, law enforcement will disband and uproot networks, entities, and organizations that promote organized violence, violent intimidation, conspiracies against rights, and other efforts to disrupt the functioning of a democratic society. And so investigating domestic terrorist organizations, that is now a new a label that they can put on you, a DTO, a domestic terrorist organization. And it calls for the National Joint Terrorism Task Force to start investigating, prosecuting, and disrupting entities and individuals engaged in acts of political violence and intimidation. This strategy shall include the investigatory and prosecutorial measures set forth in this section. They shall investigate potential federal crimes relating to the acts of recruiting or radicalizing people for the purpose of political violence, terrorism, or conspiracy against rights. I don't even know, what does that mean to say it's a conspiracy against rights? You can say, well, this group is organizing, and they were organizing about something we don't like, so that's a conspiracy against other people's rights. I mean, you could see how this stuff could be stretched very far. The violent deprivation of citizens' rights. It says they shall also investigate the institutional and individual funders and officers and employments of organizations that are responsible for sponsoring or otherwise aiding the principal actors engaging in criminal conduct in this subsection. And it talks about going after non-governmental organizations, which is something I do support. And it goes on from there. My point, and I will have this in the show notes if you want to read the entire thing, because it is all about just setting us up on the course for domestic terrorism. How long is it going to take before an American citizen is arrested and accused of domestic terrorism? They might start and say, well, they were an Antifa terrorist, but it will be expanded very quickly. You better believe it. It will be exploited very quickly. Now, let me show you one other story that doesn't have to do with Antifa, which is why it's interesting, because it's not really getting a lot of attention. It is about somebody who appears to be a terrorist, an alleged terrorist. And again, whether or not you believe this, I would be skeptical of it. But this story hasn't gotten a lot of attention, and that's what I think is curious overall. Anti-Supreme Court manifesto found on man with 200 explosives in the Capitol. This happened like 5 days ago. I didn't hear about it till just a couple days ago. It seems like nobody's talking about it. Last Sunday, a man was arrested with hundreds of explosives outside a church shortly before an annual mass marking the start of the Supreme Court's new term. Luis Jerry, 41, was taken into custody outside of the Cathedral of St. Matthew the Apostle in Washington, D.C., after setting a tent on the steps of the church as police were attempting to clear the area ahead of the church's annual Red Mass, which is a traditional service for judges, lawyers, and others in the legal profession that is held on the Sunday before the Supreme Court begins a new term. According to records reviewed by Newsweek, authorities recovered over 200 devices from his tent, which he told officers were grenades and explosives. They also found a manifesto that revealed significant animosity towards members of the Supreme Court, the Catholic Church, and Jews, because I read about this a couple other places. They don't say Jews there, but he definitely was talking about Jews. So that's kind of what is weird. It's like, is this a left-wing radical or right-wing radical? A lot of people are against Zionists, but it's typically more of a right-wing thing to be against Jews. And of course, Newsweek reminds us this incident comes at a time of heightened concern about political violence. It's all being manufactured, my friends. Threats against federal judges have also risen in significantly in recent years. On Friday, a person who attempted to assassinate Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh was sentenced to 8 years in prison. And this red mass, which again takes place before the Supreme Court comes back, is an annual thing, and it's a big thing. Police said that this man had a New Jersey's driver's license in his possession. Few details were provided about the man. The Daily Wire reported that he is from Vineland, New Jersey, but has been living in a hotel in Mesa, Arizona for several years. He was convicted of indecent exposure in Arizona in 2021, spent time in state prison from August 2022 to May 2023. According to the police report filed on Sunday, the police had been clearing the block ahead of that when an officer noticed him, and they said, "You need to move your tent." He said, "You might want to stay back and call the federales. I have explosives." The affidavit, David said the officer notified a bomb technician with the Metro Police Department in D.C. They approached him together after the bomb technician told him he needed to move because of the special event. He said, "I'm aware of that." Then he threatened to test an explosive in the street. Quote, "Do you want me to throw one out? I'll test one out in the street. I have 100 plus of them." After being told he would be removed, he said, "Several of you people are going to die from one of these." He later handed the bomb technician a manifesto consisting of 9 pages torn from a notebook with the title, "Written Negotiations for the Avoidance of Destruction of Property via Detonation of Explosives." A review of the manifesto revealed his significant animosity towards the Catholic Church, members of the Jewish faith, members of the Supreme Court, and ICE facilities. So maybe he was left-wing speaking against ICE. I don't know. They don't really mention his politics other than that. Another police affidavit filed on Monday said that the bomb technician stated there were 200 devices recovered and that the devices appeared to be fully functional, appearing as a combination of parts or intended to be converted into a destructive device. In an interview with him, the police say that he described his devices as grenades and explosives containing nitromethane with the rubber bands securing a fuse to be used for detonation. He also stated that he planned to use the modified bottle rockets with aluminum foil heads attached and treated in a thermite solution to allow for his detonation of the devices from a distance. He is facing numerous charges, including unlawful entry, manufacture, transfer, use, and possession of transportation of Molotov cocktails or other explosives for unlawful purposes, threats to kidnap or injure a person, assault on a police officer, manufacture or possession of weapon of mass destruction, which they tell us is a hate crime, and resisting arrest. So, yeah, and there's a few people who responded to it. He apparently has a hearing. I think it was just this past Thursday. I'll try to keep you guys updated on it. I don't know if this is going to be anything relevant in the bigger picture, but this is just an example of what I'm saying. It's so coincidental that as Donald Trump and his team are starting to focus on domestic terrorism, there's all this stuff popping up. You can say some of it is Antifa, crazy radicals, people who've been radicalized on the internet, or right-wing radicals who've been radicalized on the internet. Maybe some of it is genuine. People are just sick of the shit that's going on. They're sick of watching people in masks kidnap Americans off the streets, storming in their houses, militarization of the streets, violence coming from Gaza and Israel that's all supported by both parties. I don't know. Or it could just be completely made up. It could just be manufactured. But that story isn't getting much traction. And the reason I wanted to point it out to you is because I think it might end up being more important as we learn about it. And if we do hear more about it, I encourage you to follow the story, and don't be surprised if you end up realizing that this guy has some FBI connection, or he was visited by the FBI a decade ago or a couple of years ago. Not to mention the guy went to prison 2022, 2023. Those people are easy to entrap. If you have a record as a felon and the cops catch you doing something, like let's say, because they said he was caught with indecent exposure. What if he got caught doing another crime since 2023 and then he became an informant or of some kind? The whole thing could be a trap. It could be genuine. I don't know. But nevertheless, it is going to be used as an excuse for the U.S. government to start coming after Americans. Mark my words. I wish I was wrong, friends, but that is absolutely what they're going to do. It's been happening for decades now, but it's going to happen even more now that there's this increased focus on domestic terrorism in the United States. Our final story of the night is about Tom Homan. This is another one that I haven't seen reported very many places. This article I'm showing you is from the New York Times, but you can find other resources on this if you don't like the New York Times, which I don't necessarily, but they're one of the few that's talking about this. This is what's interesting to me is that there's so much corruption in the Trump administration, and it's happening so quickly. And I believe this was originally Steve Bannon's idea. They were talking about, move fast and like the big tech lords, they like to say, move fast and break things. That was like the guiding philosophy of Mark Zuckerberg and others. And Steve Bannon said, you got to flood the zone with all kind of stuff. Just keep moving so your enemies can't keep up. And I kind of feel like that's what's happening to those of us who are just regular people trying to keep up with what's going on in the world. It's like one thing after another, and there's so much corruption going on that you can't even really keep up with it. But this story relates to Tom Homan. For those who don't know who Tom Homan is, he is, of course, Trump's border czar. He's very much involved with ICE and everything they've been doing there at the Justice Department. Tom Homan was said to have received $50,000 from agents. He may not have to return it. Public corruption experts said the Justice Department had options for recovering the money used in the sting operation, but that may not happen for years. What the heck are they talking about? Like I said, you probably not heard this, but Trump's border czar was caught in a sting operation accepting $50,000. Tom Homan accepted $50,000 in cash from undercover FBI agents in an apparent public corruption investigation that was later closed. Think about that. It seems like so many people who give to Trump, donate to him, support him loyally, they, like, for example, former New York City Mayor Eric Adams had an investigation going on with him. All of a sudden, he flips from being a Democrat to being a pro-Trump person. And then that investigation gets closed as soon as Trump comes into office. I mean, the corruption is so obvious, but MAGA still stays blind to it. You don't have to be a left-wing progressive to see the corruption. Public corruption experts and former prosecutors who have built cases off similar operations said that if he remains in possession of the money as a top official in the administration, even without criminal charges or a conviction, there would still be few avenues for the government to seek the return of the cash, but the government would have to be willing to use them. On Tuesday, when asked directly by Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, Democrat of Rhode Island, about Mr. Homan during testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee, this was during Pam Bondi's questioning last week, she was evasive. Ms. Bondi declined to say whether Mr. Homan ever received the funds, whether he declared them as taxable income, or where that money might be today. She said, quote, the investigation of Mr. Homan was subjected to a full review by the agents, the FBI agents, and DOJ prosecutors. They found no credible evidence of any wrongdoing. Mr. Homan has two ducked questions about whether he accepted the money, which was in a Cava takeout bag during a recorded exchange last year, as reported by the New York Times and other media organizations. During an interview on Fox News, he said he has done nothing wrong. The public corruption investigation that agents reportedly started against him never developed. He says, look, I did nothing criminal. I did nothing illegal. A Department of Homeland Security spokesman did not respond to questions about whether he accepted the money, still had it in his possession, or would be willing to return it to the government. Justice Department regulations detail strict requirements on how funds and sting operations, sometimes referred to as buy money, can be used. By law, such money is considered government property, and department rules demand clear accounting of how much of it is withdrawn from and returned to government accounts after an investigation runs its course. They interview this former federal prosecutor who says that the operation involving Mr. Homan appeared to have unfolded, the way it appeared to have unfolded made it particularly unlikely that any money could be easily retrieved later. While civil forfeiture law generally requires the government to track and recover the same cash it originally delivered to a target, the prospect of doing so wanes when cash is not recovered immediately. He says, quote, the government can get a seizure warrant and get it back under any number of theories. It could be it was represented to be criminal proceeds. It was government money that he had no right to keep and is therefore stealing government if he keeps it. But the problem is you can't do that if you don't know where the money is. What happened to it? He goes on to say, when sting money is held by its recipients as cash or spent on another asset such as a car, the government can more readily sue to recover it later on. So if you hadn't heard about this, it's probably because you're listening to MAGA media or even mainstream alternative media that doesn't talk. And also, look, some people even who are doing legit work, it's hard to keep up with it. I get it. But the Times reported that Mr. Homan was recorded on audio tape meeting with agents who were posing as businessmen interested in securing future contracts relating to border security. Now, of course, this was before he was in office, right? But he was pretty confident he was going to get put in this position by Trump. So Trump and him are already buddies. He's going out there giving interviews saying how much he supports Trump's agenda. And then he's meeting with some businessmen who are really FBI agents and saying that they want government contracts related to border security. And he's like, yeah, I got you, bro. I got you, bro. The Justice Department shut down the investigation after Trump took office because of concerns about whether it could prove to a jury that Mr. Homan, who was not in government office at the time, had promised to take specific acts in exchange for the money. I mean, obviously, this is where the law is so freaking stupid. Okay, so he didn't literally write it down on a paper. You give me 50,000, I will give you a good deal. I will, make sure your company gets a contract or something like that. But I think it's obvious to most people, if a person who is about to go into government office and who has worked closely with the former president before is meeting with some alleged business people and is accepting money, he knows that these people work in the border security industry. Obviously, there's a quid pro quo going on. But because he wasn't in office yet and because nothing was specifically communicated, technically, they're saying that there's no investigation. And of course, Trump puts him into office as the border czar, comes in, shuts down any investigation. Several experts said that the fact that agents decided to hand Mr. Homan a sizable sum, $50,000, would ordinarily suggest that they had amassed considerable evidence that they believed he was preparing to provide kickbacks once in a position of authority and were laying a foundation to prove it. Even with the end of the investigation, they said a future administration could decide to pick the investigation back up or seek to recover the cash. The statute of limitations for bribery or conspiracy to commit bribery is 5 years, which is beyond Trump's term in office, which means the next Democratic president could try to go after Homan. And then we end up in the same situation where we have this tit for tat. Trump's going after the Democrats. Oh, the next administration is going to go after the Republicans. And it's just going to keep going on in a race to the bottom and a race towards tyranny. But I wouldn't be surprised because of that if Trump decides to issue a preemptive pardon to Tom Homan when he's leaving office, the way that Biden did for some of his cronies. But in cases where there is no conviction or even arrest, the Justice Department may be more inclined to write it off, its losses, and let the money go. The fact that Mr. Homan is now a senior official in the administration complicates the calculus considerably. So just another case, like the dude's getting recorded, secretly recorded, meeting with some FBI agents he thinks are business people, and they claim they have some evidence against him. It appears like there's going to be an investigation. Something's going to happen. Then Trump gets into office, and wouldn't you know it, he doesn't investigate his buddy. And instead, he ends the investigation. Surprise, surprise. This is what I mean, that like the corruption is just so blatant these days that you can't even be surprised, much less try to keep up with it, because I mean, what do we expect but these people to be corrupt at this point? I expect Trump to be corrupt. I expect the Democrat Party to be corrupt. I expect every party, every one of them to be corrupt in all their ways, because that's what they do. So I'm not surprised by this, but I just wanted to point it out because it's just, there's so much going on. Gaza, Venezuela, the ICE situation, and people just trying to survive, that you can't keep up with all the corruption. But I hope you guys have enjoyed tonight's show. I want to remind you one more time that the best place to support me, guys, is theconsciousresistance.com/invest. This is where you can find my P.O. box, send me love mail, hate mail, cash in the mail, sign up to support on a monthly basis on Buy Me a Coffee or my Substack, where I put all of my work. You can send me crypto if you want to show love that way as well. And of course, the other way to support me is to sign up for Civil. The best time to sign up for Civil is right now, because you can participate in the 10-week opt-out challenge, which is coming this Wednesday, October 15th, and it'll be going all the way to the end of this year, 2025. It's going to be 10 weeks from myself and John Bush going super deep into opting out. And I think everybody who takes this, especially just for $5 a month or $50 a year, is going to gain a lot of value out of it. And again, if you sign up for an annual subscription for $50 a year, you can use the code TCR20. Let me go ahead and put the QR code back on screen. You can use the code TCR20 and get 20% off your annual subscription. And that means you'll have a subscription for the next year of Civil. You can watch the 10-week challenge whenever you want. You can also be the first people to see the conclusion of the Pyramid of Power in mid-November. And there's going to be future masterclasses and skill shares we're going to be doing. So I hope you guys will sign up there. Again, civil.com/TCR, or scan that QR code, or just check the link in the description down there. All right, guys. Thank you so much to everybody who continues to support my efforts. I've been broadcasting the Conscious Resistance live infrequently since 2013. I've been doing activism for going on 16 years. I try to do everything I can, my friends, to bring you important educational information with a little bit of entertainment thrown in, and doing some analysis that you're not going to find on every other channel. I know I don't have the biggest platform out there on any of the social media networks, but I'm grateful to every single one of you who follow me and who boost my work and share my work with your friends, whether it's my books, How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State, the Conscious Resistance Trilogy, the Holistic Self-Assessment, or people who share the Pyramid of Power, those of you who come to the People's Reset, people who are excited about my memoir, or who just share my videos around, follow me on social media, email me and send me kind messages. I couldn't do this without you guys. And I want to let you know that I'm going to be dedicating my life, my time, my energy, even more than ever these coming months and going into 2026, all the way through 2030 and beyond, not only to highlight what I'm doing in my life as we build on our land, we build the Conscious Agora Eco Village, and to highlight that and show you what is possible, but also sharing the solutions that I think are valuable. Digital IDs on the rise, biometrics are on the rise, the police state's on the rise, domestic terrorism, garbage, propaganda is on the rise. We need to be prepared for what's coming. I know things aren't as intense and heightened as it was during COVID-19 84, but that doesn't mean these agendas have gone anywhere. In fact, the agendas are still right here staring you in the face. Just because things have calmed down doesn't mean we should forget what's really at stake. And that is the future of humanity, my friends. So please, push past the garbage propaganda and the corporate media. Push past the mainstream alternative media. Don't even look at my show as conspiratainment, infotainment. I'm glad you enjoy watching. Now do something with this information. Take these stories, share them with other people. Take the videos, make clips of them, share them on social media. Download my book, share them with people. Download my documentary, share them with people. Use the exit and build strategy. Whatever you need to do, my friends, now's the time. It's never been more important than ever to claim your liberty, to claim your freedom, because the 7 generations are counting on us and our ancestors are walking with us. Thank you guys so much for being here tonight. We're going to end with a music video from my sister, Alais Clay, about propaganda. It's called Propaganda Overload. And until next time, remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free, my friends. Peace.
Reporting live from Spaceship Earth to all here and beyond. Transmit a message coming through from 2021. If you're listening, I pray it's not too late for what's been done. We can still shift trajectories and train for what's to come. For the beautiful, the difficult, the rising to our pinnacles, the facing of our history and the freedom from its tentacles. The intervals of silence and the balance in between. The sifting of the fiction from the waking life and dreams. Is this 2021 or is it 1984? Is this a chapter at a brave new world, or is it something more? Is there something bigger just beyond that I can't even see? Is it triggered by the movements of awakened human beings? Cause we're headed towards a place where every move is tracked and traced. All dissension is erased, all the cameras scan your face. Here society is shaped and no crisis goes to waste. Just the perfect mix of heavy propaganda and isolation. But we're cutting through the signals, reaching through the screens, still throwing wrenches in the gears of the machine, trying to undo the mind control with laser light beams. But the fog is thick and nothing's what it seems. So we override the program, deconstruct the show, activate the shields on our bodies, minds, and souls. Living in a time of propaganda overload, but I'm one of those who will not be controlled. I'm not open for experiments, no puppet, not a pawn, not a tool for QAnon. Trust no plan, I make my own, concentrate my own energy, carry out my missions. Don't distract myself with all the latest controlled opposition. Keep my vision on my purpose, keep my inner circle small. I don't fuck with all that circus noise, I focus on my call. Empires rise and fall, but our legacies remain. I know the steps of all our ancestors haven't been in vain. It's still flowing through these veins, the will to remain free. Here to demonstrate the difference between humans and machines. One of these made to be programmed, the other's meant to breathe. I give you one guess which one of these is me. Cause we're headed towards a place where every move is tracked and traced. All dissension is erased, all the cameras scan your face. Here society is shaped, and no crisis goes to waste. Just the perfect mix of heavy propaganda and isolation. But we're cutting through the signals, reaching through the screens, still throwing wrenches in the gears of the machine, trying to undo the mind control with laser light beams. But the fog is thick and nothing's what it seems. So we override the program, deconstruct the show, activate the shields on our bodies, minds, and souls. Living in a time of propaganda overload, but I'm one of those who will not be controlled. Neurotoxins in the water, heavy metals in the air, mass poison in the food supply, officials well aware. Ask the families in Flint, ask them on the reservations. Most of the politicians aren't trying to have these conversations. Like the 5G radiation, steady rolling out in stealth. By our homes and by our schools, they could care less about our health. All complicit in compliance, I'm suspicious by default. When whole populations' immune systems face daily assault from the EMFs, GMOs, toxicity overloads, ever-increasing radiation while depleting crucial soils, all the while spreading cancer, years suppressing cures. Now the same institutions want to rest us all assured that their experiments are safe and that the odds are in our favor. Ask yourself if that's a bet you're trying to wager. Not me. But we're cutting through the signals, reaching through the screens, still throwing wrenches in the gears of the machine, trying to undo the mind control with laser light beams. But the fog is thick and nothing's what it seems. So we override the program, deconstruct the show, activate the shields on our bodies, minds, and souls. Living in a time of propaganda overload, but I'm one of those who will not be controlled.
Since 2012, the Conscious Resistance Network has been an independent media organization focused on empowering individuals through education, philosophy, health, and community organizing. We work to create a world where corporate and state power do not rule over the lives of free human beings. Our motto is leading by example and helping others in their pursuit of freedom. Visit theconsciousresistance.com to find our articles, documentaries, interviews, podcasts, books, and more. Remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free.